Rome did not fall to the sword. Not at first. For centuries, we have been told the story of a civilization overrun by barbarians, of walls crumbling under the weight of iron-clad invaders. We imagine the end as a singular, violent event, a catastrophic collision of cultures. But the truth is far more clinical. It is quieter. It is found in the palm of a hand, etched into a small silver coin called the Denarius. The Roman Empire was not destroyed by an enemy it could see. It was dismantled by a decision made in the shadows of the imperial treasury. It was a choice to lie about the value of money. By the time the gates of Rome were finally breached, the empire had already been dead for 100 years. It had simply forgotten to stop breathing. We are taught that empires die because they become weak, or because they stop winning wars. We look at the maps and see the shrinking borders, the lost provinces, the retreating legions. But this raises a paradox. If Rome was the wealthiest, most technologically advanced superpower the world had ever seen, why couldn't it simply buy its way out of trouble? Why couldn't the most sophisticated military machine in history afford to keep its soldiers in the field? The answer is uncomfortable. Most people believe that money is a thing, gold, silver, paper. But money is not a thing. It is a shared belief in a future that will be better than the present. When that belief dies, the empire follows. And in Rome, that belief was murdered by the very people sworn to protect it. The turning point was not a battle, but a chemical reaction. In the early days of the empire, under Augustus, the denarius was nearly pure silver. It was a hard, honest weight that commanded respect from the markets of Britain to the ports of Egypt. It was the glue of the Mediterranean. But as the centuries progressed, the costs of maintaining the world's largest bureaucracy began to outpace the empire's ability to collect taxes. The emperors faced a choice. They could admit they were broke, or they could change the definition of wealth. They chose the latter. It began slowly. A small percentage of copper was added to the silver, then a bit more. To the naked eye, the coin looked the same, but the chemistry had changed. By the time of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the silver content had dropped to 75%. By the time of Gallienus, just decades later, the coin was nothing more than a copper slug with a thin silver wash that wore off after a few weeks in a merchant's pocket. The state had discovered a way to create money out of thin air, or so they thought. The mechanism was deceptively simple. If the treasury had 1 pound of silver, they could mint 100 pure coins. But if they cut that silver with 50% copper, they could mint 200 coins. On paper, the emperor was twice as rich. He could pay twice as many soldiers. He could build twice as many monuments. He could settle his debts with a stroke of a pen. But the market is not a spreadsheet. The market is a collection of millions of individuals, all of whom can smell a lie. When the shopkeeper in Gaul or the grain merchant in Alexandria realized the silver was disappearing, they didn't stop selling. They simply raised their prices. If the coin was only half as pure, they demanded twice as many. This was the birth of hyperinflation, not as an accident of history, but as a direct result of state policy. The government was trying to tax its people without them noticing. They were stealing the purchasing power of every citizen, one coin at a time. This model was fundamentally different from the systems that came before it. In the ancient, you had land or you had gold. You could not manufacture value. Rome was the first to attempt a sophisticated centralized management of a currency on a global scale. They created a precursor to the modern financial system, a world where the state dictates what money is. Other empires had failed because of succession crises or external shocks, but Rome's failure was internal and systemic. They had built a civilization that required constant expansion to survive. When the expansion stopped, the bills came due. Rather than downsizing or innovating, the state turned inward. They decided to cannibalize their own currency. They traded their long-term stability for short-term liquidity. The hidden cost of this decision was the total erosion of trust. When the money failed, the society followed. Because the state was paying the army in worthless coins, the soldiers stopped caring about the frontier. They began to look for other ways. They sold their loyalty to the highest bidder. Because the merchants could no longer trust the value of the denarius, trade collapsed. The complex supply chains that brought olive oil from Spain and silk from the east simply vanished. Cities, once the vibrant heart of the empire, became traps. Without a functioning currency, you couldn't buy food. People fled to the countryside. They traded their freedom for security, working the land of wealthy lords just to stay fed. This was the end of the middle class, the end of the entrepreneur. The end of the Roman citizen. The empire didn't collapse because it was lazy. It collapsed because the state had broken the mechanism that allowed strangers to cooperate with one another. When you destroy the money, you destroy the incentive to participate in the system. This story feels like ancient history until you look at a chart of the modern world. Today, we no longer use copper to debase silver. We have moved beyond such primitive methods. We have digital ledgers and central banks. We have the ability to increase the money supply with a click of a button. The logic remains the same. When the costs of the state become too high, whether through war, debt, or social spending, the temptation to create money is irresistible. We tell ourselves that our system is different, because our money is backed by the full faith and credit of the government. But that is exactly what the Romans told themselves. They believed the emperor's face on the coin was enough to guarantee its value, but faith is a fragile thing. It cannot be legislated. Since the early 20th century, every major global currency has lost over 90% of its purchasing power. We call it managed inflation, but to a Roman merchant, it would look like the same old trick. It is the slow, steady transfer of wealth from the people to the state. We are living in a world built on the same foundations that crumbled 1800 years ago. We have traded the hard silver of Augustus for the copper slugs of Gallienus. Only now, the slugs are invisible. The lesson of Rome is not that we should return to the gold standard or fear the future. The lesson is that money is a mirror. It reflects the health, the honesty, and the integrity of the civilization that uses it. When a society begins to lie about its money, it is because it can no longer afford the truth about its power. Rome didn't lose its empire because it ran out of soldiers. It lost its empire because it ran out of the trust that made those soldiers possible. Money is the ultimate system of cooperation, but power has a fatal flaw. It always believes it is stronger than the math. It believes it can cheat the ledger forever. History suggests otherwise. Civilizations do not end because they are conquered. They end because they decide to stop being honest with themselves. And the first lie is always told in the currency.